So here I am with you, Jake, and today we're going to talk about something pretty exciting, right? That's equipment maintenance.
It seems unglamorous, but I've always taken it super seriously. Like for me, it's part of the ritual of owning a reef tank. It's not just about cleaning the glass. It's not just about testing your parameters. It's about making sure that everything is working optimally.
Yeah, and I mean that's a really good point because it's not just an issue of preventing failure. It's also an issue of ensuring that everything is working really well. So what is it that you do exactly on your setup?
It's like a feeling, and it comes from traveling a lot. It's the assumption that everything is just about to fail, right? This is a feeling that I carry from having years and years of having crummy products or used products or not the right device for the right tank. And so now I have the right devices for the right tank, but I still hold this notion that everything in the aquarium is, or every one of the devices is just waiting for an excuse to fail on. And that comes from working retail. I worked retail for 10 years, and I fixed stuff for people all the time. I don't know how many times people would bring in a power filter, a power head, a protein skimmer, say, "Hey, this thing broke. I need a new one." And I was like, "You know what? Give me like 2 or 3 minutes. Let me take a look at it." 9 times out of 10, just take the pump apart, clean it up, plug it back in, and show them like, "Oh, hey, this thing was just clogged. You had a snail caught in the impeller or something." And so it's super important to clean things regularly.
And that's you sent me a pretty cool picture today. Was that your return pump?
No, no, that was just a random share on the on a biz Facebook page, and it's really timely because we had to discuss this. And you know, this kind of goes hand in hand with my abiotic reefing approach. It's like the more stuff you grow in your tank, the more biological you make it, the more films you have, the more gunk builds up, the more like small feather dusters and tube worms will grow on all over the things. And then if you have cleanup crews, like in the late 90s, early 2000s, it was like a cleanup crew craze. And I was part of that. I worked retail, so I sold people dozens and dozens of hermit crabs and snails and sand sifting stars, and just like everything you could possibly think of. And you know what? A number of those things to end up in the sump, and you assume that you have a filter between your overflow drain and your sump, but stuff makes it down there. I have seen bubble tip anemones whole on the other side of a foam filter.
Oh, yeah, it happens. It happened in our main tank sump. I don't know how they managed to get over the filter socks, like through the multi chambers, and then through the foam material. And there's baby tip, bubble tip anemones. Baby
Yeah,
bubble
so
tips right there.
all those little snails, all those little hermit crabs, they're very curious, and that makes them very good cleaners. But some of them are going to end up in your in-tank pumps, your closed loop pumps. They're going to end up in your sump. And it's just, I remember back in the day, man, it was super common to just have a snail stuck in your pump, and it wasn't necessarily blocking the entire flow, and your skimmer could still running, your pump could still be running, and unless you took it apart, you didn't know what was inside.
Yeah, I mean, we were having that informal conversation about tank maintenance. So, and I realized I hadn't actually done any on my equipment in recent history. So I actually went through, and it's crazy too. I mean, you think everything's running pretty well, but I got the toothbrush out, scrubbed the intake on the protein skimmer, got out the fluidized reactors. Made sure they were clean. Same thing, inlets, scraped off some of exactly what you're talking about. Those tiny little feather dusters that form the shells. I mean, basically,
Yeah.
by the end of the day, it probably improved performance of the whole system by 20 to 30% just by cleaning it.
Yeah.
And that's pretty impressive, really.
So people don't pay attention to the periodic maintenance that needs to happen until something absolutely fails, right? But there's like different degrees of pump failure, or from obstructions. A catastrophic one would be like a big snail got sucked up into the intake. An intermediate one could be small snails getting stuck in your impeller and just obstructing the flow a little bit. And the thing is, though, you could have like a real small snail get stuck in your impeller, and that's going to cause an imbalance in your impeller, right? And that's going to wear out the volume inside of it, inside
Mm-hmm.
the pump, and that's going to destroy your pump over a long term, and you can't fix that. So preventative maintenance is super key to preventing tank crashes, but it also really improves the performance of everything across the board.
Yeah, I mean, and like you're saying, the longevity of the equipment too. I mean, it's certainly true of the products we make. I mean, where you have mechanical moving components in particular, um, you run that risk of you have organic buildup. You're putting more stress on all of those components. So not only are you sapping performance, but exactly as you're saying, you're increasing wear. So I mean, what do you like to do? Do you do the vinegar bath or muriatic
Well,
acid or lemon
first of
juice?
all, like I said, it's all about a mindset. Just be um, paranoid that things are going to fail on you, because in the early days things were applied from other industries, but anything with a moving part needs to be inspected periodically. Every single thing that moves, everything that has even fluid going across it. So that's the first mindset. It's just like, all right, what is moving inside my tank? We're talking about the return pump, needle wheel pumps, peristaltic pump, even the fans on the LED lights. Like everything needs to be
Mm-hmm.
serviced regularly to ensure a long-term investment in the short run, but also make sure that nothing breaks, because it's expensive to replace and it could cause catastrophic failures. So this is all like preventative stuff. And for me, it's a pleasure. It doesn't take more than an hour for me to take my pumps apart, take my skimmer out, clean all the little things, and then when it's all done, everything is quieter, using less energy, performing like it should. Yeah, so just everything.
It's funny that you say that because I actually found the same thing, or I do find the same thing. I find that a lot of the pleasure, particularly in owning a reef tank, surprisingly comes from some of the repetitive. Um, I don't know what I guess the right way maybe to describe it is I feel like a shepherd taking care of the flock. The reef tank's
Exactly.
doing well, but because it's doing well, and I think that's part of it is once your tank's established, you're not doing massive things all the time. In fact, to be
Right.
successful, you need to be doing small things. But then cleaning everything gives you just this sense of well-being that you've ensured or prevented future failure or future catastrophe to your setup, and I think that there's a lot of satisfaction in that,
Yeah.
in a
So
strange.
you mentioned the vinegar bath. I'm not big on the vinegar. There's some citric acid solutions from, I think it's Magic Clean from High Door, and Tunzi's got like a citric acid powder. But the thing is, if your equipment is to the point that it's so calcified that you need to give it an acid bath, it's already a little too far, you know? So unless you're dosing like a ton of calcium, calcwaster, calc reactor right into your pump, where the heat causes precipitation, you shouldn't get to that point. The only thing that really should calcify regularly would be your heater, because it just, the heat precipitates calcium onto it. So that's one that you don't think about, right? You don't think about cleaning your heater in a saltwater tank. You don't have to. Freshwater tank, you don't have to. In a reef tank, where you're adding a ton of calcium, any source of heat is going to cause precipitate. So I think the vinegar bath or the acid bath is probably more suitable for the in tank stuff, like the wet sides, your propeller pumps, your nozzles that tend to grow a lot of stuff. Algae, tube worms, fermented snails, and coralline algae, because that's kind of part of a healthy reef tank.
I mean, I think that's an interesting thing too, which we always talk in the reef hobby about in massive generalizations. And that's actually another interesting thing is that people always ask these questions like, how much light do I need? How much flow do I need? How often do I need to clean my equipment? There's no simple answer. The answer is, well, it depends a lot on the specifics of your aquarium. But kind of what I'm getting to with that is that it's if you have a tank which you're heavy on SPS and you're aggressively dosing your alkalinity and calcium, you're going to get more calcium buildup than on a tank where you're doing it to a lesser degree. So you need to kind of just keep that visual, stay visually attuned and use kind of common sense. You're the expert
Yeah,
on your tank, right?
absolutely. You're the expert on your tank. I think, a lot of people, mostly newbies, but even intermediate reefers and some old reefers, they feel like once they set up a brand new tank, they probably shouldn't have to fiddle with any of the moving parts for like at least a year. And that might be true of like the return pump if you got a powerful return pump. But everything else, especially if your protein skimmer needs regular maintenance to stay really, really clean. Even, it's only recently that we've started using dosing pumps to in great in large numbers, right? Dosing pumps have been around for a long time, but now we have multi-channels. People are going 4, 7, 8 different channels, and those need maintenance too. That peristaltic tubing needs to be replaced.
I've had to do
The
that.
calcium,
Yep.
the calcium solutions for our aquariums have gotten so concentrated that if there's any tiny bit of heat source right next to a motor that's dosing the calcium, you can get precipitation of crystals. And those crystals will cut your peristaltic tubing. So especially your calcium line, it's not nearly as much of an issue with the magnesium and the calcium, magnesium and the alkalinity. Your calcium line, definitely want to flush that with cold water.
You just give me something else to check, Jake.
And the other thing is,
I have not checked the compression tubing inside my dosing pump, and I really should probably do that before it just starts dosing calcium all over my floor.
Yeah, so picture this. You set up your dosing system. You've got a half liter, a liter of really concentrated solution. You're sucking from the bottom of the bottle, right? And that bottle might be sitting still for 3 months, 6 months. Over the time, like there's just a natural accumulation of some calcium crystals, and they can suck those right out of the bottom. But the other thing that's kind of important to remember is calcium carbonate actually dissolves in cold water, not in hot water. Hot water will precipitate it. So when you're clearing out the venturi in your protein skimmer, that's salt creep. You want to use hot water. When you're clearing out the calcium lines in your dosing pump, you want to use cold water because that's going to dissolve your calcium a lot better.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's very interesting, and I mean, as you pointed out, it's something that we can become very complacent at very quickly.
Yeah.
But it degrades the performance of our system, and therefore degrades the performance of our success in the hobby. So, great concept, great thing to keep in the forefront of our minds, I think, as we go forward.
I developed this from traveling a lot. Since I travel a lot, a week before I leave, this is when I'll do all my maintenance and just basically give, a check through of everything, make sure it's all good, and that gives me the peace of mind when I travel. But you don't have to travel to give yourself that peace of mind.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks very much, Jake. Appreciate your time, and I'll let you get back to it.
Sounds good, man. I'll talk to you later, Jay.
Yep. Bye-bye.